Some say DS games will never come to Nintendo Switch Online because they'd be too difficult to port over. Every DS game is displayed on 2 screens, and the Switch only has 1. Some say it's too difficult because DS games rely too much on the touchscreen, with some games being entirely reliant on touch. While these things are all true, they're not as big of a barrier as many people think. For one thing, some DS games have already come to Switch. Take Square Enix's The World Ends With You, for example. The original version of this cult classic DS RPG uses almost exclusively touch controls. Yet a remastered version of the game, subtitled Final Remix, is available on Switch and controls perfectly fine using a single Joy-Con's IR sensor to replicate touch controls. It's just like using a Wii Remote pointer for inputs that would normally be touch. What's great about this game too is that when taken in handheld mode, the touch portions can be done one-to-one on Switch's own touchscreen. Unfortunately, this isn't the final solution for all DS games. In the original The World Ends With You, battles stretch out between the 2 screens, during which you have to manage your partner on the top screen while you engage in touch-based combat down below. In the Switch remaster, gameplay is altered so everything works on a singular screen. So even if this game holds the answer to replicating DS touch controls, it doesn't address the dual screen problem. But you know what? That's okay, because this problem has been solved before too. And for this, we only need to look back to the Wii U's Virtual Console. For many games, the optimal way to play is having the TV display the DS's top screen, while the gamepad's touchscreen and stylus is used as the bottom screen. This configuration is a great solution for many games, but it isn't perfect. Luckily, Nintendo realized this and allowed players to freely adjust their screen setup, providing a handful of display options, many of which would work extremely well on Switch. For DS games, in both TV and handheld mode, screen options could be fine-tuned to better suit the experience. For example, if you're playing a game like New Super Mario Bros., which barely uses the bottom screen at all, you can choose to enlarge the top screen and still have a small version of the touchscreen beside it, readily available for you to tap during the few cases you might need it. But if you're playing a game like Kirby Canvas Curse, which is primarily displayed and controlled on the touchscreen, you can simply change the display settings and choose to enlarge the bottom screen instead. Now that we have solutions for both the touchscreen issue and the dual screen issue, I think we've successfully argued the viability of Nintendo DS games coming to Nintendo Switch Online. It's time to get into the fun part. The lineup of games that I think would come at launch to the hypothetical Nintendo DS Nintendo Switch Online service. For my lineup, I'm going to select 10 games to be available from the start. But with that out of the way, let's get into the first game on the list, and that's Super Mario 64 DS. We already have 2 ways to play Super Mario 64 on Switch, both of which are better ways to get the pure Mario 64 experience. But still, this doesn't change the fact that Super Mario 64 DS was the very first game I wrote down for this lineup. This launch title, for me personally, is just about synonymous with the console itself. This is the first game I got with my DS, and it's the one that really showed me what the handheld could do. It blew my mind as a kid being able to play a real deal 3D platformer on the go, not tied to a TV or home console. But this game isn't included here just because of its technical significance at the time. If you didn't already know, 64 DS is a vastly expanded version of the original game that's totally worth playing today. It features 3 additional playable characters, brand new content including 30 new power stars to collect, and a side set of minigames that I remember spending far too much time in. Yes, this would be yet another version of Super Mario 64 on the Switch, but it's also the one game I don't think I could build this list without. Every Nintendo console in existence has a bunch of great Mario games, and the DS is no exception. That's why for game number 2, I'm choosing another one of the Plumber's mainline adventures, New Super Mario Bros. This is the #1 best-selling DS game by a wide margin, and it's the game that began a long-running series within the 2D Mario franchise. It's crazy to think that such an important pioneer title is often forgotten, as its successors on the Wii and Wii U seem to be talked about more frequently. But New Super Mario Bros. Is another one of those games that should instantly come to mind when thinking about the Nintendo DS. It's another game you really couldn't have this list without, and mechanically, it would be a perfect transplant from DS to Switch. It's a pretty straightforward 2D side-scroller. Plus, there's no real reliance on touch controls during the main campaign. While we'll be talking about more Mario games later, I want to take a break from the Mushroom Kingdom to talk about another one of Nintendo's top IPs, The Legend of Zelda. Nintendo DS was home to two original top-down Zelda games. The first of these, titled The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass, is another shoe-in for NSO. I say this while fully realizing that Phantom Hourglass is one of the most touchscreen intensive games on this entire list. So much so that all of the action takes place on the DS's bottom screen, rather than the top like most other games. Even still, by utilizing the Switch's touchscreen in handheld mode or the IR pointer on a Joy-Con controller, this Zelda game would surely be playable, and dare I say more comfortable if brought over to modern hardware. For my lineup, I'm choosing to include Phantom Hourglass at the start, since it's the first game of the duology, then having its follow-up Spirit Tracks hit the service post-launch. Sticking with the theme of obvious selections, the next game I'm picking for the launch of the DS Online service is none other than Mario Kart DS. Another one of the most popular games on the console, Mario Kart DS is just as much fun to play now as it was during release. It's a fan-favorite entry in the series that debuted popular tracks like Waluigi Pinball, Airship Fortress, and the Super Mario Sunshine-inspired Delfino Square. But perhaps the biggest selling point for Mario Kart DS, and what I remember most vividly about it, is that it was the first game to utilize Nintendo Wi-Fi connection, Nintendo's first serious foray into online multiplayer gaming. Racing with other players online, although it seems inevitable for any Mario Kart title releasing today, was a huge deal at the time of Mario Kart DS's release. As a kid back in 2005, I remember having my parents help me connect my DS to the Wi-Fi router, and marveling at the fact I could race with other players from across the world. With Nintendo Wi-Fi connection now discontinued, firing up some online Mario Kart DS in 2023 via Nintendo Switch Online would be completely nostalgic. Remember, many multiplayer games in other NSO libraries have been given online capabilities, including other Mario Kart titles. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that if DS games are coming to Nintendo Switch Online, we will certainly see Mario Kart DS among the titles showcased at launch. While we're on the topic of online multiplayer, I want to take this opportunity to introduce the next game in my DS launch lineup, which is Metroid Prime Hunters. Perhaps best known for the First Hunt demo cartridge that was included as a pack-in with a lot of the earlier shipments of the Nintendo DS. Similar to Super Mario 64 DS, Hunters was another game that completely wowed me at the time, as it showcased the ability to have a legitimate 3D first-person shooter on a handheld. This type of game would have been a nightmare on just a simple D-pad. But the DS's much more precise touchscreen aiming turned it into an experience simply not possible on previous handhelds. Metroid Prime Hunters is, in my opinion, an essential game for the NSO DS library, and one that absolutely should make its way over at launch. Also, it needs to be noted that Hunters boasts robust competitive multiplayer modes that were sadly not brought over in the game's Wii U Virtual Console release. A re-release on Nintendo Switch Online with the multiplayer features restored could be a great chance for Nintendo to right that wrong once and for all. The third of a trio of Nintendo Wi-Fi connection games, I'm also giving Tetris DS a spot in my Nintendo Switch Online launch lineup. At first, you might think this is just another edition of Tetris on NSO, in which case, you would not be wrong. But what you might not know is that Tetris DS was developed fully in-house house at Nintendo, with its menus and game modes featuring a wide array of Nintendo characters and music. To be honest, I was a late arrival to this game, only playing it for the first time a few years ago. But even then, it was instantly clear. This is a special game and one of the more underrated on the hardware. Sure, in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it is one of my all-time favorite ways to play Tetris simply because it's so full of that Nintendo charm. I think Tetris DS would fit nicely into this NSO lineup, since it's so different compared to many of the other games on this list. It provides some puzzle game representation, which is a genre that's quite at home on the DS. And this isn't even to mention Tetris DS could take full advantage of the Switch's online multiplayer. Even Touch Tetris could be brought over, but you'd probably want to stick to using handheld mode for that one. Okay, last Mario game on the list, I promise. But the first of two Mario & Luigi RPGs on the handheld, Mario & Luigi Partners in Time, is also a must for this NSO launch lineup. Partners in Time takes advantage of one of the more underrated improvements the DS has over the Game Boy Advance: 4 face buttons rather than its predecessors 2. Partners in Time makes full use of the expanded button layout, as each of those 4 face buttons is mapped to the actions of one of the 4 main playable characters. A and B are for Mario and Luigi's jumps, while X and Y are used to control their baby counterparts. This control scheme led to some truly unique puzzle platforming at the time, and the added buttons are put to full use during the series' signature action command-based combat. But Partners in Time isn't just a game made to show off a control gimmick. It's still, to this day, one of the better Mario RPG adventures. Right in line with the other games in the series, it features some beautiful sprite work, memorable character design, and that sharp, often hilarious writing that Mario RPGs are known for. The Nintendo Switch's 4 face buttons match the Nintendo DS layout exactly, so there would be no control weirdness if this game was brought over to NSO. It would be a truly seamless transition, and a great experience whether you choose to play it on the TV or portably in handheld mode. Kirby is one of the more highly represented Nintendo franchises on the DS, with 4 full retail releases to its name. For the launch of the DS service on Nintendo Switch Online, I'm choosing the first one, Kirby Canvas Curse, to be part of the launch lineup. Canvas Curse is arguably the most unique to the Nintendo DS hardware, as the game revolves around using the touchscreen to draw paths of rainbow ink, guiding a spherical, rolling Kirby across a series of 2D stages. Though this game is extremely touchscreen focused, it would still work great on Switch, whether you're using your fingers on the touchscreen in handheld mode or using the IR pointer with a single Joy-Con. Canvas Curse is one of the more innovative Kirby titles ever made, and one that always sticks out in my mind when thinking about the DS generation. I'd love a chance to revisit it on Switch, and as a more unconventional 2D platformer, I think it's a nice change of pace from the other more traditional titles on this list. Of course, we can't forget that the Nintendo DS has one of the best RPG libraries of all time, so it's only fitting that the one DS Fire Emblem to be released in North America, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, gets a priority placement on this list. The Nintendo DS edition of Shadow Dragon is a remake of the very first Fire Emblem game for the Japanese Famicom. An updated version of the original did hit Nintendo Switch as a limited release in 2021, but that version is currently unavailable, and really, that version is primarily geared toward hardcore Fire Emblem fans that are already invested in the series. Getting the DS version of Shadow Dragon on NSO would serve as a great entry point to the series for new players. It's much less obtuse than the Famicom version, yet it's still a tried and true old school Fire Emblem. No overworlds, no casual mode, and no support combos. Just your classic weapon triangle and some good old grid-based strategy. Before I get into my last game on the list, I want to mention a game that I really wanted to include but ended up cutting at the last second. With these lineups, I like to try to include at least one exclusive release. This could be anything from a brand new localization to an obscure game that might not have been released in North America or Europe. Something like Star Fox 2 in the Super Nintendo lineup, or Kuro Kuro Kurin for the GBA. For this one, I tried my hardest to see how I could fit the game Nintendog's Best Friends into the lineup. It's hard to imagine the Nintendo DS without Nintendogs. It's another one of those series that feels ubiquitous with the hardware, and Nintendog's Best Friends is an exclusive cartridge only available as a pack-in with certain console bundles. The Best Friends version allows players to pick from all the most popular dog breeds from the start, rather than being stuck with version exclusives. Unfortunately, the Nintendog's games rely on the Nintendo DS microphone far too much to be brought over to Switch as is. A big part of these games is calling your dog by name, and the Switch has no built-in microphone. Other DS games might require you to blow in the microphone once in a while, but that's something that could be bypassed with a simple button press. Something like the voice recognition in Nintendogs, unfortunately, would be a little bit too much to ignore. While it might be possible to connect an external mic to the Switch just for this feature, I feel like everything needs to work out of the box for it to even be considered for NSO. So instead, the game that I'm including for the final spot is one of my personal favorites, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team. We've talked about games that are just about synonymous with the DS hardware, and as we all know, it's nearly impossible to talk about the Nintendo DS and not mention the Pokemon series. I'm actually shocked that I got this far in the video without a single mention until now. If previous console lineups are anything to go off of, one thing is clear: the mainline Pokemon titles won't appear on NSO. But Pokemon spin-offs on the other hand are fair game, and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is one of the best of the bunch. Fans of this series will know about the Switch remake, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX, which is effectively the same game with a new visual style and some small improvements. But an NSO release of the original would still be awesome to see. It's always great to have options, and if Blue Rescue Team were to be added to NSO, then it would allow us to play both the original version and the Nintendo Switch remake on the same console. How cool would that be? With a library as big as the Nintendo DS's, 10 games seems to barely scratch the surface of what's possible. There are many incredible DS games that didn't make this list, but the good thing is, most of these make for great potential additions to the NSO catalog post-launch. I'd like to know what games you'd want to see in a Nintendo Switch Online DS lineup. Do you think we'll see DS games anytime soon? Do you agree with my list? Or am I missing some key games that need to be there at launch? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. And if you like this, then hit that subscribe button for more Nintendo content. Thank you as always for watching.